Good day, good day. Thank
Sorry?
you for joining us. We've got people coming in. Nice to see all the people logging in, joining us from wherever you're joining us in the world. Thank you for joining us today. I'm very, very excited about today's topic. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. And joining me, I have someone also who has been on this journey with our clients, helping them execute and manage their strategies. So very, very happy to have them with me as we discuss the best practices of how to implement, plan, and track your strategies. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tawela, and I'm the co-founder and managing partner technology at BI Technologies Africa. BI Technologies Africa is a digital transformation company based in Johannesburg, South Africa. And we help organizations take them through the digital transformation journey where we get people and technology together to help them improve the performance of their organizations. We have consulted in various industries, from multinational companies to pharmaceuticals, private sector, financial services, as well as in the public sector, where we've done a lot of strategic work for utilities and government departments. Maybe if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you're listening from. My name is Dan Mukosa. I'm one of the partners at BI Technology. I'm actually the person who leads the advisory section of BI Technology. I'm also the chief product owner for a lot of the products which actually produce, because what tends to happen, BI Tech, is we develop business solutions for clients, and then we bring the digital aspect. So it's me who tries to see if we can digitize everything, or most of the things we recommend to customers, taking them through the digital journey.
And I must say, one of the products that we've developed actually came about from Dan's work with his team in the business advisory section, which was around implementing strategies. They used to do it very manually. And he actually challenged myself and my team to say, can we not create a tool that automates things and just makes my life easier when I'm doing my consulting work at the clients? And he'll talk a bit more about it because he's the product owner, he's the chief product owner for that tool. But today, the reason why you're here and you've joined us is because we are discussing best practice in strategy execution. So the whole purpose of this webinar is for us to create awareness, as well as take you on a journey on how you can actually leverage technology and apply the best practices when it comes to planning your strategy right in the inception stage, as well as how best to execute your strategy, and then also towards the end at closeout, where you now want to start realizing those benefits and actually measuring them. So at the end of today's session, you will have a very clear picture on how to use those best practices and take them back into your organizations and practically implement what you'll be learning today. So the webinar will be split up in 3 parts, where the first part is the discussion with Dan, and then we're going to go deep dive into some use cases where we will be looking at how you can apply the best practices, how you can leverage technology, but we will use use cases to help us unpack that a little bit further. And then the last part, the third part, is the Q&A. Okay, so let's get started. Are you ready, Dan?
Ready, born ready.
All right, let's get right into it. So I think maybe just let's get started by actually defining strategy. The reason why I would like us to do that is because as we've been implementing strategies for our clients in whatever industry it could be, I mean, the last one was for a big pharma, multinational big pharma. We realized that, or I personally realized that just the definition of strategy, everyone seems to define it or not really understand what it is. And it seemed to be a little bit vague. So maybe just to set the scene for today's
Yeah.
webinar, maybe just talk to us. From your definition, what is your definition of strategy?
Yeah. So yes, Toela, I think for me, yeah, strategy is a very ambiguous and misused word
Yeah.
in corporate and also in life. But it actually originates from military, and what the intent was, you create an action plan which is forward-looking, leveraging your strength and opportunity to beat the competition. So what you do is make sure that whatever works for you and whatever is great for you, utilize it so that the competition where you don't know their size, you don't know their strength, you still end up beating them. So from a corporate perspective, strategy is really a forward-looking action plan which leverages the strength, opportunity, to try to be able to outperform the market. Whichever way, so you need to define what outperforming the market is. And while you're doing that, it needs to be sustainable, consistent to generate shared value. So it's not just outperforming the market at all costs, but it needs to generate shared value. That is literally my simple definition of strategy. And yes, it's very debatable because, like I said, I've done it in more than 20, 30 organizations, and it's always relative because of part of the ambiguity of the levels. So I'm going to define there's 3 levels in strategy. So there's the first level, which is around corporate strategy, and that is literally the shareholder or board's mandate. And what comes out of that is a strategy document. And usually the custodian or the accountable party to that strategy is a board. So that's level 1. Then level 2 is the operation strategy. So that's a strategy which ESCO or the executive committee, the management committee is actually responsible. That one is more of from the mandate we build the strategic plan or what we would call business plans in place. So we create the business plans. And the third level is the functional strategies. And those are ones which break the business plan into actionable initiatives, which are driven by the business case. So the reason why I said debatable is that somebody will come and say, but I'm working at this level and I'm driving strategy. I'm like, yes, you are, but you're actually driving the tail end of it. So you're actually driving part of the initiative which you actually see, but it actually has to originate from some form of mandate, from some form of shareholder, from the board, which then creates this foresight. And when we are talking about our conversation today, what we're talking about is that high-level strategy where we are saying the one which is defined as a mandate, and it's this big foresight, we're going to take over this in 4 or 5 years, and we'll be able to manage this kind of markets, revenue growth, A, B, C, D. How exactly do you actually execute that? Because when you break it down, which is ambiguity, which usually comes, is we get this mandate, give it to the line function, which is straight jumps to the functional strategy, and everyone kind of thumbs up, thumb sucks it until we do a strategic review 6 months, 1 year down the line, and come and what did you do? And that's what we're really talking about when we talk about strategy.
Okay, so basically, your definition is more around there are 3 levels. There's the high level, the corporate strategy, which is just the mandate from the shareholder, which is more forward thinking, foresight. What are we doing? What's the plan for us to beat the market? And then we've got the operational strategy and the one which is now more on the line functions, which is now your functional strategy. But then you said something that interests me, and I think that's something that we've also seen when we go back to some of our clients ask us to come and review a strategy, and then they say, look, this strategy didn't work. Can you review it for us? And that's something that you said, sometimes the corporate strategy is set and then it's just pushed down, but it actually doesn't get implemented or executed. So from your knowledge and your experience, what are some of the problems that actually contribute to corporate strategies not being executed efficiently?
I'm going to use an example of a client. So I'm not going to mention, obviously, because it's sensitive information, but we have a client we've been working with the last 6-7 weeks, and they've been doing their strategy. They had a 5-year strategy, and according to the assessment, it didn't work. So I'm going to use kind of what came out from that review, which I think is a common denominator. I'll focus on what is common across the 20 or so odd clients we've actually worked with. I'm going to bucket it into 3 areas. I'm going to say there's a human capital element of it. There's a kind of governance and process element of it. And then there's the tools of trade, which affect the effectiveness of the strategy. So the human element has probably got about 4 parts to it. So number 1, people just don't get it, dedicate people to implement strategy. If I remember properly, when I started learning about strategy about 15, 16 years ago, I did a masterclass with McKinsey & Company, and they would come and say, can't companies which are groundbreaking, innovative, and are market beaters dedicate 30% of their resources to strategy, 70% to current operations. So it's a 70-30%. And I always tell my clients to say, I assume that 70% you have departments, you have job descriptions, you have business units and budgets allocated. I wonder why the 30% is lacking, why everyone does not commit a budget, a structure, a business case, and also an operations to it, right? So when I think about that, you realize the first problem is that we actually don't have people who are dedicated to drive the strategy, not implement the activities, but drive it. Drive it here means I'm tracking it, I'm escalating it, I'm holding people accountable, I'm making sure that the reports are happening, I'm making sure that the intent of the mandate, the initial strategy is met, not the actions of the projects. We do that very well. We give it, somebody comes and says, the intent is capability building. What somebody does is they go and train people and come and say 100% done. But the capability has not been assessed. Because if the capability is to improve competency, which then improves productivity, we should actually measure productivity. So if the productivity has not changed, your training has done nothing. So you need people come and say, what was the intent? The intent was to introduce improved productivity, which is an example of this company, which is a multinational company, which is trying to go across the SADC region. And did we meet that intent, or we just went, got some service provider, trained everyone, and come and said, oh, we've now trained people, can they do, now we are done with the strategy, it's 100%. No, it's not. In fact, it's 0% achieved from an impact perspective. So that's the first one. The people who are the custodian to drive that. Very, very important. Usually number 1, which means from the human capital. Number 2, sponsors. We don't have sponsors. Strategy is driven, develop, board creates, probably is a sponsor. Then it comes down, Mr. CEO probably comes and says, look, you know what? Everyone takes whatever is affected, put some KPIs, let's do it. That's not sponsoring. Sponsoring is the active interest in making sure that the intent is actually met. CEOs are very busy. They are the accountable officer for strategies. But in the end, it's any of the executive who has got any form of insight and responsibility on the shared value, which is the strategy generates. As long as you're in that value chain where the shared value comes and you are accountable for it, you can be a sponsor. Generally, to be CFOs make very good sponsors because they've got the budget, they can audit the findings for the benefits, and they're able to also allocate resources appropriately. But anyone can actually sponsor it. Then the last two things around probably human capital will be the competency to actually implement. It's when we develop strategy, they come out as initiatives, which in the end are interpreted as projects. And people do not actually respect them as projects. They just come and this idea we're supposed to do, just give it some line function, let them run with it. You need the competence, the right competency level to actually implement it as a project. And I say that those people, as a term which I coined, called strategy champions, are actually needed to know what they're doing and to actually do it very well with the discipline it actually requires. If you think about project management, we do a lot of project management. It's a science on its own, but we do not respect strategies around that. So that's the first one. The second one is really around, I say, tools of trade. Generally, when you want to get something done and you want to do it consistently, you have to have a tool. What tends to happen in most strategy executions is this: we don't have a risk tool which manages the risk or which looks at the impact on the strategy, not on the project.
Yeah. So strategic risk and not project risk. Yeah.
So if I am doing a project where I'm building capability like this company, but I don't look at the regulations in the country I'm going to, that could affect how well, if we even start production. So hence affect the mandate, which is the shareholder wants us to get 20% market share in that new country. So very different. The other one, the project manager has done, closed it out, trained people, people are happy to bring the certificate. But the risk on the strategy is usually not measured because it's one of those very ambiguous, and then it doesn't show that you've actually executed it. So very good tool. Second one, dashboarding, just tracking and monitoring, making sure that you have a method with which you can have the transparency to see that foresight, that future, if it's working. Are we on the right runway? Very important. Third tool, when it comes to tools, is the implementation methodology. Now we talked about project management or whatever. How are you going to implement this? So when we have an initiative on our strategy, what's the standard way of implementing strategy in our organization? Do we give it to everyone and then the thumb suck it, figure it out, and try to see what happens? That's what generally happens when it comes to strategy execution. So the methodology itself, or the framework, the strategy implementation framework, is usually missing. And then lastly, we need a tool which helps us. We are foresight, we're being foresight. We need to look at what warns us, what alarming mechanism do we have, which actually helps us predict if we're right, predict if something is going to impact us, because we don't know. Usually with strategy, good strategy, you have known unknowns and unknowns, and you would have addressed all of them. And if you don't have a tool, you have a problem. And lastly, the third element is around public governance. That's a big one. I can talk about governance in strategy execution the whole day, but I'll simplify it to like 4 reasons or 4 issues which usually come out from governance. Number one, we have no controls to make sure that people do the work. So nothing forces us. The only thing we have is a strategy review 3 months, 6 months, 1 year down the line. Literally, that's the only control mechanism. Because everyone is moved from that 70-30, they are doing 110 operations and minus 10 strategy. So they can get away with it because we need to keep we need to keep the cash flow ticking. We need to keep the machine running. That's number one. Number two, reporting, very poor. It's just done at the end. Again, when we're doing a review, then we're like, let's try to report this thing. Let's try to see. Give them enough information to keep the leadership quiet. Thirdly, roles and responsibility. I talked about a sponsor. I talked about strategy champions. You need to have clear roles of what everyone plays to make sure that your strategy materializes. Usually your strategy is there to beat the market, so you're probably doing something which is not business as usual to beat the market. You
Yeah.
need experts, you need analysts. You literally business analysts are key. You need people who can make predictions, do some research, make sure that the macros are not affecting the organization. The last governance you probably need more than anything else. You need to track and monitor the actual implementation itself. So you need a dashboard. Definitely, you need a dashboard which helps with your controls and also helps you track the compliance to the frameworks you've implemented to bring up the disciplined executions. Those will be kind of the key issues people will face around strategies and why they actually don't work. And you find that it's usually a lottery, it's a hit and miss, because people do not respect them as initiative which needs to be driven deliberately. Like a project or an initiative or anything which is of importance.
I want to add there, Dan, another thing that I've also seen is that some resources are not also put behind the strategy, not only from a people perspective, but also from a financial perspective. So you will find that a lot of the initiatives that an organization is running will be more operational than the strategic type of initiatives. And you will find that most budgets are allocated towards OPEX and then very few towards the strategy. So that's another thing where I've seen why some strategies are failing is because there's not a lot of resources. You've mentioned the human capital, but also from the financial aspect where organizations are not really backing up what they want to do with the financial muscle.
I think just to add on that, the 70-30 split was effort and finances. So the effort, so the time you're spending physically, you're doing the organization, spending 30% implementing your strategy, and have you actually allocated the budget to implement? You're trying to beat the market, so it's not gonna be easy. You need to invest, spend money to make money. It's as simple as that. It's not just gonna come with with it being free.
Yeah. Attendees, there is a poll running, very fitting to the last topic that we've just discussed, which is execution barriers. Kindly take part in the poll. Tell us in your organizations or from your experience, what do you think is the biggest factor that affects or contributes to strategies failing? So Dan, you mentioned from your experience, I mean, and this, by the way, is from an African perspective, like most of the strategies that we've helped organizations with has been in Africa. So obviously this is from the experience that we've seen. He mentioned three things: human capital, he mentioned governance, and he also mentioned having the right tool. But now that we understand the problems, now let's go into how do we even solve or close this gap? If you were to mention maybe three main elements that you would advise organizations to put in place so that they can ensure or mitigate the risk of their strategies failing, what would those three things be? Almost like a checklist.
Honestly, there's only one: get ESOL.
I agree.
So I think the starting point is to create a function. It could be full-time, it could be part-time, it could be a working group, which is actually responsible to drive a strategy. Like I said, if this is the thing which the company is going to depend to grow, to outwit the market, to beat the market, it can't be like a side thing and by the way, and you're still hoping to do it, because competition is very stiff. Now with a lot of people leveraging technology, everyone has got access to the same information. Everyone has got access to the same tools and capabilities. So the little small things like getting a team which is dedicated, competent enough to be able to understand the intent, keep emphasizing, of the strategy as opposed to the the outputs of the activities makes a big difference. The intent talks about the impact it makes on the organization, not
Yes.
the results of the activity you actually do. That would be probably the first one, really focusing on making sure you get the right people, right responsibility, right sponsor. The second one is we are living in the time of AI. You need to get the right tool. You need to be able to track and the person who's able to predict the known unknowns and unknown unknowns better to readjust in real time, I think is gonna be the person or the organization to beat. Or they're gonna be the organization which is ahead of the curve. Getting a tool which enables you to make sure that at any given point in time, you understand where you are. That 30% effort is either being done, or if it's not being done, you're aware of it and you're being deliberate on how you can actually close the gap. I think that would be very, very, very important. To really just be able to be informed at any given point in time. We are living in this era of hyper technology and AI. Is your strategy giving you, hyper information? Is your strategy giving you that amount of information, and are you interpreting it? Are you getting insights from it? And are you leveraging AI? AI very, very important to actually use to make sure that you make the right decision. Strategy at the senior level is about driving and making the right decision, also making sure there's discipline in actually implementing it. The third thing I'll really talk about when to say that what's like the big checklist is to make sure that you have a standardized way with which you implement strategy. Have a method. This thing of we have a strategy, it's done by this beautiful consultant, it sits with C-suites, and then the C-suites go to the business unit line and come and say, which part? Well, can we generate KPI? It's not a method. All you've done is just simplify it to just come and say, look, because it's not the most important thing, at least for me, let me just tick a box and let me look like I'm doing something. That doesn't look like 30% effort, which is going to give the company, help the company outperform a market which is very competitive. Those will probably, to me, will be like the three things. I mean, there's a lot of things. We have a checklist for strategy execution, strategy development. I can really literally talk the whole day about it.
Okay. I just want to add on to being a techie on the AI topic. So let's not forget that as much as we can use AI to help us with our foresight thinking, help us with predictive analytics, giving us the information, testing our assumptions on our strategies, ultimately the decision still remains that of a human being. So we can't go back to board and say, no, this is the strategy and it came from AI. You as leaders still need to be accountable for the decisions that you make. As much as AI will give you access to information very quickly, we still need the humans to make those decisions, those strategic decisions. It just helps us make those decisions quicker, faster, and better. So you've talked about the checklist and what organizations need to put in. You need to set up a team with the right people, put in the right, get a tool that will help you with tracking and monitoring more regularly, because nowadays I've noticed a lot of people are reviewing their strategies. They don't wait for 5 years or 3 years. They're actually reviewing their strategies more frequently. That's a trend that we've seen, especially after COVID. And then also have a standardized way of implementing your strategy. But now just to close the execution gap, maybe can you give us from your experience how, when it comes to execution, how leaders can literally close that execution gap? I think from your experience, you've worked in command centers, war rooms. Maybe if you can just give the audience a bit more insight on how you can leverage command rooms, war rooms, command centers, on how to close that execution gap.
Yeah, so historically, I got to do strategy, like I said, well, now probably about 15, 16 years. And I was lucky enough to be involved in command centers, which run as strategy. What it literally means is like the way you have NASA in the movies, you've got a lot of screens, a lot of analysts and consultants. You've got a big board where ESCO sits, and this thing works 24/7 doing forecasting, research, and interpretation of information which might sway the decisions which ESCO makes. When we started doing consultants with BioTech, we tried to kind of sort of implement it, and we realized people don't actually have the bandwidth, they don't have the capital, they don't actually have the resources to create commands. And this is for big utility banks and stuff who have the budget to have these things sitting with 20 people and trying to drive the strategy or what they would call mission critical projects, which are driven from the office of the CE and the office of the CFO. Not a lot. So I think one of the things which came about as we're doing consultants is trying to see that can we get organizations to do it with minimum capability, capacity, but still get the same output. And to do that, what we've done is we've leveraged technology ourselves. So we spent the last 1.5 years developing a solution where we've come and said, can we kind of replace all those 20 screens and 20 consultants with something which will be working 24/7 in the palm of your hand and is actually more productive and more smarter than it. So one of the things you could really do, with at least we've done, the approach we've taken ourselves is developed a platform called ISO, which literally becomes the nucleus of strategy execution excellence. It brings the standard way with which you're going to drive strategy, tracking, monitoring, and audit at the same point, while at the same instance being able to create an environment where you can review your strategy planning and execution, and later on the benefit realization. So all three can be done in one. Usually it's very complicated because what happens is that the EPMOs of companies, the project aligned functions, implements the projects, they quote, they wash their hands and come and say, I'm done, we've trained the people. But what happens with assessing the benefits? Are we really, is the productivity really improved? And is it improved at the rate we want to? How do we do that? How do we access that? That's a big gap. Technology can allow us to do that. And also technology can allow us to help us navigate. I always say that you need a system which is like Waze for anyone who drives and uses Waze or Google Maps and stuff, which on the spot, as people update the information, it can reroute or reroute you or help make you think about the direction you should actually take. You need that for strategy. In fact, the best implementers will have an understanding of what route they should take to get the results they actually want. So being able to put that together will help close the gap.
Just a bit of feedback on the poll that we ran. The question was, what is your organization's biggest barrier to executing strategy effectively? And we had words such as lack of accountability, lack of understanding shareholder intent, adjusting and tracking the changes is something that people feel are the biggest barriers to executing their strategies. I'd like us now to go
the last
into...
point?
Yes.
The changes, because that's very important, especially now that we're in a VUCA environment. After COVID, things changes. Technology can help. In fact, let me probably even bring the aspect of AI, and I'll kind of talk about the use case we're using with the client who's going, who's driving strategy across Africa, moving from South Africa to create offices and stuff. They've used AI in 3 aspects. You can use it in 4 ways, but 3 aspects specifically. Number one, they have a strategy which has got multi-variables. AI can interpret these variables, put them together, and give you a sense of how the strategy is performing. Number one, very difficult. It will require a lot of analytics. Manpower, and even then, some fancy algorithms will be needed if you do it in Excel to come and say, how is the strategy performing? That's number one. Number two, AI is helping them predict how the macro is affecting their strategic pillars. So when they go to that company, that country, and there's a regulation which will automatically affect how those start running up commissioning their plant, they already get a pre-warning to come and say, this is coming. That literally replaces, for this specific company, they used to have what they would call spotters and marketers and BD people in those countries. Full-time working, telling them, look, you're not going to replace that, but the AI automatically reads through it. And yes, people can, it can read rumors and stuff, so you need to filter it out, but it preempts that. That's the second thing. The third thing they're using the AI for is to try to understand what best practice is. We don't have a lot of information in Africa, so it's a bit ambiguous, but if people are going through this journey, how did they go about it and how successful it was? I mean, people can use ChatGPT, whatever it is, but it helps them benchmark and tell them to say, using your historic performance, we anticipate this might succeed or fail in that these elements we are seeing or noticing on the ground, the data we are getting, will affect it positively or negatively. That kind of is how this company has leveraged it, and it helps close that gap where you're like, we actually, like I said, an unknown. And up until we step into it and we do it, we'll learn as we go. So the learn as we go is helped with the early warnings.
Great. So I like on the early warning. So like right now we're in the second part of the webinar where we now want to see some use cases. So my colleague Dan will just log into ESO, which is the Electronic Strategy Office. And we will now discuss some use cases from what we've seen with working with our clients. All right. I just want to flow in from what you just talked about to say early warnings. So I now have a strategy. I've got I'm in an organization. I'm part of the team that has been appointed to track the strategy. But before that, how would you recommend a tool can help with strategy planning?
Okay, so yeah, so one of the biggest challenges, and maybe I didn't highlight it, is that when it comes to strategy development, brilliant. There's a million consultants who do it. That just stands out. And there's beautiful documents sitting in people's drawers which have never been opened. So strategy planning for me starts with creating a runway. So you create a plan of kind of what are the key steps you're going to do to make sure the strategy is going to manifest itself into results. So you come up with a strategy plan. The strategy plan to make sure that the strategy plan is going to help your organization with proper or with good best practice requires stage gates. You need to make some assessments at each level to come and say, how do I make sure that I'm on the right path from the beginning of this initiative? I don't just wait to the end of the initiative. So one of the things you could do is kind of what we've done with our tool, where we've come and said, look, for the planning perspective, we've created assessments. The assessments go through the value chain of a project. By the way, our tool has piggybacked on the project management lifecycle. So it's whatever you're going to get from PMBOK, where you start from initiation to handover. I'm not going to deal with that because the platform does not duplicate, does not compete with project management. It just uses it. In fact, even uses a lot of project management information as an input. That combined with business cases completes the information on the platform. And the strategy document obviously need to get the pillars, the intents, and kind of the runway of what we want to achieve when it comes to the impact. Yes, I agree too. So there's like 3 main inputs to the platform. But the key, what is it best would be implementing the initiative. Without that, we don't really have a tracking and monitoring tool. So when it comes to planning, we've developed assessments where on our platform, you can go to literally come and say, how do I assess that I've gotten the right intent? And we've called it the user requirements. And it literally does the assessment for you if you have the data in the format we have, but we've noticed 90% of the clients don't. So we've created a manual kind of workshop slash survey we conduct. And then it spits out a good report which comes and tells you all the things which are affecting your quantification of the strategy document before it's converted into the plan. So before you put the responsible people, the timelines, what are you going to achieve with it, who's going to be responsible, the measures of impact, and the productivity which will get you there. It does that. Then the second stage of it is the business case. Each initiative should have a case. Why are we doing it? How is it going to help the strategy? And if it's going to achieve a market share, what activities are going to achieve the market share? And how much of the activities are going to achieve the market share? We do an assessment around that and then we score it. Then the last part around the planning is the readiness, where we come and say, now that you've got the business case, it's been approved at whatever committee it is, finance committee or investment committee, are you ready to implement this strategy? And all this is done to create assurance for the board that your strategy will work. Because now you're creating the standard, that standardization of how we implement that, making sure that we have everything. Because we're investing. We're going to invest for 30% of our amount, and we don't have structures, we don't have business units, we don't have cost centers. As a minimum, put some stage gates to make sure that the money doesn't go to wasted. So what do we have on the system? So we have an ability to be able to do the readiness, the business case, and all of them on our system, we're able to conduct, get a report. So if let's say I choose a business case, I'm able to go to the business case. I could perform an assessment. So I could go perform an assessment. It tells me the different levels of the assessment. I'm not going to go into it because it'll take the whole day because it's actually a lot of work to do the assessment. I could also go business case and view the assessments. Immediately, the system is set up where it's raw-based. The sponsor of the projects gets notifications for or the initiative gets notifications for all the activities which are happening. So the project or the lead implementer and the sponsor are always updated 24/7 on the platform and on their emails. They receive emails to be told. So you get a report like this, which is a summarized report. You can click it and it will give you the detailed information around the project, around the business case. Sorry, I didn't do the right one. Supposed to do one around the market model. If you do, you print a detailed report. Okay, it will look like this. It gives you a score. So it tells you the project a score. It tells you all the different areas of the business case, how you've scored the impact initiative, the benefit realizations. Sorry, so it's got a report like this to be showing business case, project marketing, what the score is, gives you the different section of a business case, summarized with recommendation of what you need to do, and the information that was inputted. AI can do this, but you need the information in a certain format. So we've realized with a lot of the clients who've signed up, they don't have. So we literally make it a strategy slash survey, but you get the same output. The sponsor gets a report immediately, and they can read it and see. And what tends to happen from a governance perspective, so let me share now the actual dashboard, the platform.
Got it.
Good. So I was saying that, okay, so those are the assessments. For each one of them, when it comes to the assessments, we're able to help you with the planning itself. Each one of them, there's a survey or there's kind of AI in the background which does it if you submit the information. So it independently scores you. When it scores you, you come, and if you come to the initiatives, these are the different initiatives. So this organization has this is dummy data. There are different alarms. So you can see business case under marketing is 70%. This specific company, if the business case scores below 85, they stop the project. It has to go and correct the information on the project. That is the discipline which is actually required. So the sponsor gets the report talks to the team and tells the team, look, team, we need to fix this. We can't have a situation where we are going and we're starting the initiative, but there are certain things which are actually missing in the business case. So you can see it's flashing. When it flashes, it creates an alarm. So as a login, I'm logged in as a sponsor, so I get the alarms here and also get the notifications, which help me track what changes have been happening in my portfolio. So any changes which have been affecting my portfolio, I'll get them along. And then the ones which have got alarms, I get an email. I can also clear the alarms if I want to. So this is part of just the early warnings part of it. I can pause, look at the alarm, go into the detail, acknowledge it, and come and say, look, I know about this. I've been told about it. I say yes.
Yeah.
And then later on, if I come back and come and say, look, I didn't acknowledge, I didn't see that this thing happens, there's always an audit trail, which tells me when I acknowledge. So I just acknowledge.
I like this, Dan, because this is a platform that really does help with also, as much as you've shown us how it can help us think and standardize how a methodology in how we implement our strategies using those assessments. The nice thing also is that it really does help with the monitoring and tracking, as well as the alarms that you've shown us through the running messages across the screen. I think the nice thing also is, you mentioned it earlier, that this information is accessible on mobile phone or tablet. So an executive, whether you're in a boardroom, whether you're on the road, you will have access to this information. And when you get the notifications, whether it's in an email, you can actually quickly log in and see what's happening and respond appropriately. So I can definitely see how a tool can help with your monitoring and tracking. But now, Dan, I just want you, right in the beginning, when we talked about the problems, you talked about tools of trade, and you also talked about it's important to have a risk tool, looking specifically at the impact of the strategy not materializing and what that risk could look like. Maybe could you show us a use case on strategic risk, and maybe if you can just demonstrate that for us.
Okay, I'm a bit cognizant of the time. We have 9 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm gonna just go through it quickly and maybe just touch on maybe
and then we'll go to Q&A.
the other use cases the clients actually use it for, so that maybe we at least be left with 5 minutes to talk. So that's 3 minutes I have. So we have something called the impact risk. The impact risk obviously is pretty much a risk table, which allows us to track the impact on the business case. So we identify the risk in a way that it focuses more on the impact. So you have the risk, defining the impact, which initiative is affecting, is it high or low? Is it under escalation? Is it being monitored? Is it being managed? There's different, then you can put the mitigation and the accountable person for the risk. If you're the sponsor of the project, you've got a couple of functions around the risk. You can literally, when it's done, you can say the risk has been mitigated, it will close it out and it will blur it. So if I say this one is mitigated, it will say close, approve. And when we go back, we'll find that that risk has actually come to the bottom. It's that risk, it's been escalated. And if I feel that 1 year down the line, because impact on strategy can be 2 years, it's not effective, I can undo it and it brings it up. There's a workflow in the background and some AI which is helping you interpret the risk and the actions which are being done at the rate they're done. And it sends you warning as a sponsor to tell you, hey, this risk is not going anywhere. They're not fixed. They're waffling in the meetings. When you're asking them, they're just waffling because the impact is actually not being seen and it's not being, the effectiveness is not actually happening. So that's the risk mitigation. So it's a risk register with some AI and some workflows to create early warning. Again, if you're approaching the deadline, only the sponsor can change the deadline. It sends you a warning again to say your risk mitigations have not been completed.
Okay, cool. Before we go into the Q&A section, thanks, Dan, for sharing that use case with us. We run a poll which talks about strategy tools. Thank you. We had an 85% participation rate, so awesome. The question was, which tool do you rely on most to track and manage strategic execution? 100%, well, 6 people said spreadsheets, emails, and collaboration tools such as Teams. So these are the kind of tools that our colleagues are currently using. No one currently is using a strategy software, and there are some people that don't have a formal system. Okay, let me just quickly jump. There was a question in the chat, and it came from a Mr. Mahluza, and he says, with regards to assessments, you talked about templates. Is it fully managed by an ISO team, or can we do it as our own in our company?
The problem with doing it on your own in your company, the player and the referee, you're going to score it 80. The company which is using this tool, the CEO said all the assessments have to score 85. Put a control, because they want to be assured that things are done based on best practice. Can you imagine if my boss is going to make me go back to do my work? I'm probably going to score 100. So it has to be independently done. So ideally, it should be done by AI if we have all the information, which is usually not the case. So it will be done by BITEC, making sure that we tick all the boxes and we make the right recommendations.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. There's another question. Is there a way to do a quick quality assurance on my projects if I do not have time to go over the platform as a self-service?
What does quality assurance even mean in a project? So we have...
Oh, question and answer. Is there a quick way to do a quick question and answer on my projects if I do not have time to go over the platform as a self-service?
Yeah. So, okay. So we have this page which has got the initiatives. Literally, and we talk about reporting, right? You can go click view and it gives you every information on that project. So it gives you the normal project information, timelines, finances. It gives you the metrics performance from a strategy. We have a strategy, what is it? Section which just does strategy. We didn't probably get into it, but it tells you the performance of it. It tells you the risks affiliated with that project. It tells you the assessment scores, and you can deep dive in each one of them upfront. And also, you have the ability to actually print a report, export it as a PDF to your leadership as an email, but literally, without necessarily playing around with the platform, if you at least log in and you're part of, you have access, a read access, you can go and it will give you summary 24/7, not waiting for strategy review to try to put this information. Is available, and the details and all the red flags on that specific initiative.
Cool. I'm very cognizant of the time, so thank you very much, Dan, for taking us through those use cases. Very informative, and I know as part of governance, reporting is very important. You need to report to steercos, and you showed that in this tool, you can report on your initiatives, you can report on your strategic pillars, on your objectives, as well as the performance of your strategy. So thank you for showing that. You can also report on the risk. So thank you for that. To wrap up, everybody, thank you for joining us wherever you joined us from. We really appreciate it. This is just the first in a series of more webinars to come where we're educating people on how to actually improve your efficiency when it comes to strategy planning, strategy execution, and strategy monitoring, really helping you as leaders in your organizations, helping you really make sure that the shareholder intent gets realized, as well as helping you manage the return on investment when it comes to some of these strategic initiatives that you're implementing in your organizations. With that being said, just to wrap up, we talked about best practice when it comes to planning, when it comes to executing and closing and realizing your strategies. We talked about the problems that are typically faced in the organizations. We talked about how to solve those problems, what you need to put in place, even as a checklist. And then we also just dived into a tool that you could use in your organization to help you implement some of the best practices that we've talked about today. The tool being the ESO, Electronic Strategy Office, that you can go and read up on and actually visit our LinkedIn page for you to see more and get more information about what ESO is and how it can help you. Please follow us on LinkedIn. I am Toela Zulu Mukosa on LinkedIn. Follow Dan Mukosa on LinkedIn. Follow Bytech on LinkedIn for more information when it comes to strategy. With that being said, thank you so much. I don't know, Dan, if you'd want to say something.
Get ESO.
Okay, get
If you
ESO.
care about your strategy, get ESO.
Awesome. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining
Have a nice
us.
day.
Have a
Cheers.
good day. Bye-bye.